يعني هو هذا البرزنتيشن has two parts يعني راح ناخده على 2 weeks this week and next week إن شاء الله. So today meetings is quite different than what we had studied before. But the sound and picture is clear. Yeah. Can you see the screen and hear me? Okay, thank you. So this presentation is quite different than what we studied before. It's more used in a real life. So what we had studied before, it's usually interacting with the user through a command line, the black screen. But this is not the reality. If you're designing an application, you need to have some interface to interact with the user. So this is what we're going to study today. So the objectives of this week and upcoming week is studies a couple of things that's related to creating a graphical user interface such as the UI controller, the pins, the boxes, attacks, event-driven. So we will go over those all during this week and next week meeting, inshallah. So first, let's introduce JavaFX. What do we mean of JavaFX? Actually, it's a framework help us develop graphical user interface, GUI. So when you're having buttons, you have a text box, checklists, whatever. To do something look like this, you have to use a JavaFX framework. The JavaFX, it's the recent frameworks for the graphical user interface. Before that, we had the Swing and the AWT, which is the application Windows Toolkit, the AWT. Those was the old framework to develop the graphical user interface. We don't use them anymore. So the graphical user interface include anything visual user need. So here we always get to override the start method that is coming from an application to serve our need. Okay. What's the argument of this method? It's going to take an argument with a type stage. Stage is also a class that we're going to use. So you don't need to really care about what it has inside it. It's like when we're using integers, string, and so on. It's a class and it has certain properties. What's important for us here, the stage is the main or the first level of putting your stuff on the application. I'll give you two examples, maybe to simplify the idea اللي حق JavaFX. I'll give you two examples and you choose which one it's make more sense for you to connect different components of JavaFX. So the first example, you can imagine the component of JavaFX as when you go on a theater. So the stage represents the stage, المكان اللي يجلسوا فيه actors, okay? So this is the main things. The stage, everything's going to happen inside that stage. After that, you have a scene. So we have a scene like المشاهد. ممكن يكون فيها مشهد مشهدين. all these scenes كل هذه المشاهد is gonna to happen inside the stage. Okay. After that, so this is the second thing. So scene is gonna to be inside the stage. So it's gonna to call by the stage. The third level, you have the buttons. In this example, the button is just an example, but you can have a text box, you can have checklist or whatever. Those we call them actors or node. So you can have an actor is going to be inside the scene. But sometimes we need something to organize the actors على أساس إنهم يكونوا in a certain place. We will see something called the pin. Okay, so we will see it soon. That is going to organize the actors together and is going to be inside the scene. So المثال الأول على أساس إنه يسهل لكم فكرة الجافا اف اكس ستراكشر. الستيج تتخيلوها مثل الستيج اللي حق المسرح. بعد كذا السين راح تكون فيها ممكن يكون فيها أكثر من مشهد. لما يكون عندنا المشهد راح يكون فيها actors. الactors هم الbuttons هم الtext and whatever. The second example from our real life, something we always use Microsoft Word. لما يكون عندنا Microsoft Word, for example, you can imagine the stage as a Word document. Inside the Word document, you can have many pages. So since تتخيلها إنها pages. And then inside it, you can have create a text box, which is البين. We will see it soon. And then you will put inside that actors. Okay? اللي هم buttons in our example here في الوورد ممكن أن نحط table ممكن أن we insert pictures and whatever. Okay? If you feel like you're a little confused what's the structure of JavaFX, pick up one of those examples and try to connect it with the components اللي حق JavaFX. Okay? So first, we just mentioned in the previous slide that we have a class called application. This is a built-in class موجود. It's already on JavaFX. It's not already built in for Java. You have to add it. It's a built-in, but you have to add it manually. So if you pick up any of the example we having today during the lecture, and you try to run it directly on a NetBeans, it won't work. Why? Because it needs special libraries that you need to download it from the internet and add it to your application or to your class. Okay? So it's already built in, but you have to add it manually. You don't need to define it. So an application class, the most important methods on it that we're going to use is the start method. And we always need to override it. Now we will I'm going to just repeat what I just said. So a component is going to be used with those applications. We have theaters, we have scene, and we have the nodes, which is our actors. So the stage or theaters is a window of displaying the scenes. اللي هي الشاشة الأساسية اللي نشوفها whenever you're creating any application. The stage object called primary stage. Okay, so this primary stage you don't need to create it. It is going to be created automatically by the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine. When you launch where we were. Okay, so we stopped here when we was talking about Java virtual machine component. So we said we having the stage, the scene, and the nodes. Okay, so we already explained that the stage, or theaters, it is the object is gonna to put displaying all the scenes on it. And the main things, or the primary stage will be automatically generated. You don't need to create it. Whenever you launch, you will see in the example, whenever we call launch application, the Java virtual machine will create the primary stage automatically. Okay. Now, what about the scene? So you can have more than one scene. So let's assume you're having the first scene. Let's assume you're having a page full word. The scene is going to get 3 arguments. The first argument, you need to tell what's the actor is going to be in this scene, and you need to decide the size of this scene. So the width and the height of the scene. So you need to decide the size of the scenes. And this is going to be with pixels, measured by pixels, okay? And the third thing, which is a node, the actors. The actors such as the buttons, in general, we call them the controllers, the UI controllers, which is the buttons, the text box, the drop down, the checklist, and you can have the pins, the groups, and the shapes. We will see them. So the UI controller is different than the pins. The UI controllers can be set inside. Let's just remove this one. So it can set to be inside the pins. Let me show you a picture that it may clarify the idea. So we're having a node, which is an actor here, okay? A node or an actor can be 3D shapes. It can be shapes, normal shapes, and it can be parents. In parents, it can have the regions, and those is going to hold what's important for us. What we're going to focus on today, here, the pin. You can imagine it like a text box اللي موجودة في بالوورد اللي هي مكان تحدده بالstage. So you can put the stuff on it. مثل controllers, the UI controllers اللي هي buttons, the text, whatever. So the beans is just going to be certain area or location you're going to put the stuff on it. Okay. So the beans, the UI controller, will shapes. There are different. Okay. A node can be any of those. مثل ما شفنا, we just see it with the graph. It can be shapes, it can be image view, it can be UI controller, group, or pins. The shape is just refer to text to put something, such as you can put it a circle, rectangle, eclipse, whatever. What's important for us here, what we're going to study, the pins with the user UI controller. So the pins is a container class that it's used for automatically laying out node in a desired location and size. And this is what's important for us here. A desire, oh, sorry. I thought I used. A desire, location, and size. This is what's important for us. We will see different type of pins. Each of them is going to tell you different desired location and size inside the stage or a scene. فالآن البينز في لها أنواع مختلفة. كلها راح نشوفها قبل شوية. الكي points, the difference between them هي اللوكيشن والسايز اللي حقها. Okay, so this is the first things we're gonna to take care of. The other things, but we are not gonna to really focus on it. The group, what's the group mean? A container of a group, it's collection of nodes. You can apply transformation of efficient effect to group, which is automatically applied to all children of a group. So if you put, let's say, 2 triangles, 3 circles on it, and then you said this group full of those shaped with green color, make it, for example, doesn't appear when you click buttons or whatever. So instead of going to the nodes one by one and apply certain effects, you just group them and apply it in all nodes. It's exactly when you're selecting, like FlowWord, if you imagine it, if you selecting more than one component or elements FlowWord, and then you apply certain effects. The other important things here, UI controller مثل ما كنا قبل شوية. Example حقها البوتنز labels لما نحط only text, checkbox, radio buttons with text field with text area. All those are an example of UI controller. طيب, how we can build a graphical user interface? There is a certain, let's say, step. You need to understand it and memorize it. Maybe it's like a little confusing at the beginning, but then when you use it, it's like a rhythm. Most of them, it's similarly. If you take a look to the example in this meeting, you will see like the first part, this, and the second, and the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. It's going to be almost all of the example, almost. Most of the example has the same step. What we're going to work on it is the 3rd and 4th. Let's see what those mean. First, when you create any class, you have to extend the application. So you can use its own properties, and you can override the main method, which is the start method. Here, this is the start method that we get to override. If you don't extend the application, you cannot override the start method. The second step is override the start method, which is will hold all your Java statements. So here will be your Java statement. All your statements is going to go here. Okay? So the statement, let's say here. So number 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7, except till 8. All these steps from 3 till 7, it is going to go inside this brackets. So we're creating the start override, the start method, and we put step from 3 to 7. And after we finish it, we run the application that launched. This is going to be inside the main method. Okay, so we have only 2 methods in most of the example here. We have the start method and we have the main method. Inside the main method, we just get to run this statement to launch the application. And inside the start, we will have the step what we will explain just soon in a second, from 3 to 7. So okay, inside the start, if you remember, we said we having the stage, then we having a scene, we having the actors. During the definition, you start from the smaller one. So the smaller one here, the actors. So first, we take care of the actors. This is the third step. Create your nodes, اللي هم actors. So you defined which is the actor. You're starting from the smaller component. The bottoms, the label, this is what you defined first. So from type bottoms, this is already a defined class. So we create a variable called btOK, and then we call an instructor and we put OK text inside it. So this is the first things to define, actor or node. The second step to do is defining a scene. So we will go, as I just said, to remember that you go from the smaller الأكتر هم اللي راح نبدأ فيهم. فراح نعرفهم في البداية عندنا هنا فقط البوتون. Then we have to create a place we put that node اللي هي الأكتر راح نحطها inside the scene. So we define the scene now. So second, we will define the scene. What we are going to put inside the scene, we're going to put a node that we just defined, okay? A third step, we will go with the bigger picture, which is the stage. So the stage, after we will start still having, okay, so okay. So we will place, we will do the stage now, okay? So we need to place a scene inside the stage. We just said that the primary stage is going to be defined automatically. You see, في buttons, we create the buttons, which is the actor, the first step, the smaller part. Then we create a scene, so we can place a node on it. But in this step, we didn't create the stage because we just mentioned before, it's going to be created automatically. Okay? So what are we going to place on it? Now, we're going to place a scene. Okay? So you see, step one, we create the actors, such as the buttons, the label, whatever. And then we create a scene and place an actor on it, such as the buttons. After that, we call the primary stage. We don't create it, but we place a scene on it. The stage, it has a 3-step. Okay? The stage, it has a 3-step. You set the scene, A, you set the scene. B, you give it a title. A title, you're going to see it on the top of your application. And C, you're going to show it. If you don't say that it's going to show, it's not going to show on the screen. Okay? Any question about this? This is going to be the primary idea of what we get to see during our lecture. I need you to remember the main things. So during doing any example, step 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 8, always be same. We're not going to change them. What's important for us is that things going to go inside the start method. Step 3 until step 7. It is going to have 3 main steps or sub-steps here: creating an actor, creating a scene, and then initializing or setting a scene inside the stage and giving a title and show it. To make it clear for you, we'll see an example. Example 1. Let's see it inside NetBeans. So I'll just highlighted what I just explained in the previous slide here, and then we will go to NetBeans. So this is the step 1. It's always like this. You put, this is your class name. You extend it with the application. And this is second step. You override the start method. It has only one argument. This is the name of the argument, the primary stage, but you can call it anything. It's the primary stage, but you can call it BR, you can call it BS, you can call it P1. It doesn't matter, but you need to make sure that your naming is reflecting also inside the code. But what's this variable type? This is stage. So this is the second one. This is, we agreed that we are not going to change it at all for our example during this meeting. And the last one, which is 8, if you remember, we launched the application inside the main methods. So how many methods do we have? Main and start only. So now we'll go to NetBeans and explain what we're having inside here. Okay, so this is example 1. You see here, I call it example 1, it's different naming, and then I extend the application. Okay, inside the start, first I create a variable called PTOK, and then I call it constructors اللي حق الbuttons, and I put OK. That's what is this going to create? It's going to create a buttons, one buttons, and we have OK inside it. Then we will create, as I told you, we will start with the smaller. الbuttons هي الactor, هي اللي راح نبدأها. First step. Second step is scenes. Where are we going to put it? So we create a scene and we place الactor اللي هي الbuttons inside it. 200 and 250, what are those? Anyone remember? What are 200 and 250? Of what? The width and the height of what? Yes, you're right. It's the width and the height, and it's by pixel, but it's for what? No, it's not for buttons, for scenes. Thank you, Ahmed. So this is the dimension of the scenes, not the buttons. This is step 1, step 2. A third step is the stage. So now we will, it doesn't matter if you're starting with a set scene or you're starting with title. So title of our application, my JavaFX, and we will do set the scene as a scene. So let's run that example so you can see it. Okay, so this is the output. You see, we just have one big buttons because we didn't define beans, what we're going to see soon. So this is the need of it. And this is the title here, you see, set a title as in my JavaFX. So this is a title. And this is the scene. At the beginning, it was 200 and 250, which is a size we set it there. So I told you, the primary FX, you can call it anything, but you need to make sure you change all the respected names inside your code, okay? So let's back to our presentation. So this is the example here. In output, what are we going to get out of our code? They explaining the output, the one that we just saw. Its display buttons is always centered in a scene and occupy the entire window. And this is because we didn't use البينز. الآن هم في الإكزامبل الأول حنا عملناه to figure it out one problem to tell us why we need to use البينز. يعني حنا لو ما استخدمنا البينز على أساس إن هي تحدد لنا إطارات الأماكن، بهذه الحالة راح يكون الأكتر أو الإليمنت اللي حنا راح نوضعه مثلا البوتنز راح ياخذ لك الانتاير ويندو. So البينز if we don't define the beans, the actor or the node is going to take the entire window, okay, like what we just saw in the example. For this reason, we need to use a container, the class called the beans. Or you can imagine it like a textbook, like a Windows. Again, the key point or keywords here for it is to laying in a desired location with size, okay? And instead of letting it in, doing it in entire windows. So, the problems we had in the previous example is that a node is going to occupy an entire windows. What is one of the solution? Is we using pins to laying out a node in a desired location and size. Okay. To do so, we need place a node inside the beans and place the bean into a scene. إذا تذكروا, we said first we had what? Who's remember? First we had no, the bigger picture, the one on the theater, the stage. Okay, Isam. After the stage, what we had inside it? After the stage, what we had? A scene. Good job. And then what we had? Buttons is one of the examples. A node is one, yes, it's a node. So then we have the nodes. Okay. الآن البينز, where is gonna to stay? Where is gonna to located? خلينا نقول البينز as it's here, it's purple. So البينز, where is gonna to be located? They tell you it's a place, a node inside the beans. So you hear a node is going to be inside the beans, will beans inside into a scene. Okay, so now we add one more layer. So before we had the stage with scene with nodes. Now we have nodes controlled by the pins. Okay, so here's the pins, and we having here is a scene, and we had on the big picture the stage, and the last the smallest element اللي هي a node. Okay, so now a scene can contains, so what a scenes can had on can hold. It can contain a controller, the group will pin, but not a shape and an image. So for this reason, if you would like to put or place a shape or an image view, shape or an image view, for example, if you would like to place it inside the scene, you have to use a middle component, which is a node. Okay, we are not going to doing this during these lectures. What's important for us here is a pin or a group can contain any subtypes of a node. So this is what I just told you. We having the stage bigger than the scenes, then a parent, which is can be a pin or controllers, and then we have a node inside it. What we're going to study today, there is a different type of pin. So a pin, it is going to define اللوكيشن and السايز. اساس انكم دائما تتذكروها ايش اللي راح يفرق فيها اللوكيشن والسايز. هي هذه اهم شيء ان نحدد فيها where is the nodes going to be inside the scene. So we will see the flow pins, we will see the grid pins, the border pins, the hbox pins, vbox pins, but not the stack pin. We are not going to study during this lecture. Okay. We already explained this, the UI controller, what does look like, with shapes and the image view. Okay. There is something called, or a concept called binding properties. What is the binding properties? The binding properties is that when you're having an object, You have a target object and you have a source object, okay? A target object is going to be bound into the source object. So if you're having a source object here and you're having a target object, if the value in the source object, if anything's object change on the source object, it's going to reflect on the target object. It's going to be changed as well. So if the value in the source object changes, the target probabilities is also changed automatically. So this is what is called binding probabilities. The target object is a simpler call, a binding object. So this is what we call it, a binding object. So if you're having a source with target, you need to remember in a binding object is a target object. This is what I just told you. We get to study different layouts of beans. So JavaFX provide many type of beans for organizing a node. We just said organizing, its main location and the size. Where you're going to put the buttons on top, on left, right, center. So this is all depending on the type of bean you are using. There is the simplest one is beans, is the base class for layout beans. It contains the get children. The get children method, we have a slide explain it, but now to remember it, it's a method get to put a node as an a list inside the beans. So inside the beans, so you can imagine this is the beans, and you have bottom one, bottom two, maybe text box here, and maybe like an area text. Those is gonna to list. How you gonna to get those using a get child? Those are stored inside the beans as a list, and we call or we invoke till get children to give those node from it, okay? So it's returning a list node inside the beans. So if you would like to return, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 nodes. How you can return those lists? We invoke the get children method, okay? The stack beans is place a node on top of each other in the center of the pane. So if we having a pins, you put bottoms. This is 1, 2, 3. They get it to put as a stack, but I made something mistake. In the stacks, we supposed to start from top or from the bottoms. I don't get your question, Abdul Manam. Just explain your question so I can answer it. Okay, so let's do it properly. The stack beans, it was for source and target. How about in this verse? Still, I don't get your question. Okay, so the stack, like what when we study the stack, is going to start from the bottom. So you will present the bottoms. This is the first bottoms, 1, for example, then 2, then 3, and so on. So this is the stack. The second type of layout is the FlowPane, which is place a node row by row. No, it doesn't. Yes, a source is gonna to has a reflect on a target, but not the opposite direction. So the flow panes, it is going to be has a row by row as a horizontal or column by column as a verticals. You define this when you invoke this class. The grade panes is going to have it in a 2-dimension grade. So you imagine you having a grade and you need to decide the dimension. So you said 1 and 2, 0 and 3, and whatever. So you put it as a pair, whereas the XY dimensions. The border pane, it's take care of if it's top, right, bottom, left, center region. An edge box going over a single row, a V box going over a single column. We will explain each of those. The flow will grade, the border will edge box, will V box in details now with an example. So the first one is the flow panes. What is the flow panes doing? It's arranged a node in a pane horizontally from left to right. So it's going to be horizontally starting from left to right. This is the default. This doesn't mean you cannot define your own laying out. So you can say, no, I would like the flow panes to do it vertically from top to bottom or from bottoms to tops. You can do this as well. So this is the class, the FlowPane class. If you would like to use the FlowPane class, you have to import this line. I said import JavaFX scene.layout.FlowPanes. As usual, the class, it has two parts, the attributes and the methods, right? So an attribute here, an element, it's going to define the overall element of containing the pins. So it's going to be left, it's going to be right, where you would like to having the pins on. By default, it's going to be left. As we said here, it's going to starting from left. So it's going to be left. Then we having the orientation. So it is going to be horizontal and orientation. It's either everyone doesn't have a sound or only a noun user. By the way, if you're entering by a noun user, I cannot get your attendance. Can you hear me, guys? Okay, good. The orientation is going to be either horizontal or vertical. Okay, so we done with alignment والorientation. الإدج gap هي المسافة, so the horizontal gap. Okay, and enter please the username with your actual name and ID. So the edge gap, it's going to be a horizontal gap between a node. By default, it's going to be 0. Similar with the vertical gap, it's going to be a vertical gap between a node, and by default, it's going to be 0. Okay? So those are the attributes. We have 4 attributes. Then to create pins with a type of flow pins, you need to call what? A constructor. How many constructors do we have here? How many constructors do we have in this class? 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So either you created and you didn't decide, you didn't give it, you don't give it any arguments, so we're going to use a 0 argument constructor. Or you can define a horizontal and a vertical gap, or you can define an orientation, and a horizontal. sorry, and horizontal and vertical gap. So this is what we talk about orientation. So it's either going to be in horizontal, which is a default, or you can enforce it to be vertical. So you need to call orientation.vertical if you need to make it vertical. You can specify the gap between a node and a pixel if you need to use a ستر والجتر. hGap and fGap are private attributes here. How we can change them? We need to use the ستر والجتر. We don't have full methods here. We have ستر, we have getter, we have other methods. So they just mention what's important for us during this lecture, which is the constructor. But all those attributes, which is such as vGap, hGap, has a ستر and getter as well. So الattribute, element, orientation, hGap, vGap, and the binding properties, all those are available as an attribute. To set or get them, we need to use a ستر or getter. This picture is just trying to display what's the meaning of each component we explain. So first, let's take a look to the one on the right here. Okay, so this is a pin. If you decide, they said a right side is going to be 5 pixels or whatever, a right side is this side here. Okay, then we having the left side is the one is here. Then if you're using a top size, I didn't change it, okay. So top size is the one here. And the last one, if we are using the bottom size, is gonna to be the one here. So if you're using inset to inset it, top, right, bottom, left, you're defining depending on the size you would like to do. So this is about the beans. So let's move now to the second picture here, okay? We're going to talk about the actors, such as, for example, buttons. So hGap is the spacing, the horizontal space between one another, and the vertical gap is the vertical space between one bottoms and another, and the other stuff we already talked about it in the first pictures. Okay. So this is the example for FlowPane's layout. As I told you, again, extend the application. First step, always similar. Second step, override the start method. And the 8th step, if you remember, اللي هي launching the application is going to be similar. What is different is starting from here. So first, we need to define the actors. Then, you remember, we're starting from inside until outside. What's come after the actor? The pin. So second, we need to define the pin. After the pin, we need to work with what? After the pin. So first, the bottoms, the pins. What's after the pins? No, it's not the stage. One more. Scene, right. So third is a scene, and what's the fourth? After scene? No. So this is a node. 1, 2, pins, 3, scenes. Fourth, the stage, you're right. Okay? So let's see it. Let's see the code. So this is the example here. So first, we need to import all necessary classes. Then we extend the application. We override the method. Here, first, we're starting with the actor, which is a node. So we're creating an array called the B. And what's the type of this array? It's button. Like when you're creating an array of string, of integer, of whatever, of any classes, like when we're creating TV, shades. Now it's called, we created with a type of buttons. Does it have anything inside it after this? This is just initialization. We haven't created the buttons yet. How we create the buttons? So this is just going to initialize it. To say we having an array list, or a list, sorry, it has 5 places for a buttons. But then when we actually creating a buttons, we have to call a new buttons and put what the text we get it to put inside it. So what do we get it to have? So a loop is going to start from 0 until a length of p. So until 5. So we get it to have 0, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, not 5. Okay, so we get it to have 5 buttons starting from 0 until 4. Okay, can anyone tell me what's the text going to be inside button number 3? The third buttons, it's going to have a text inside it. What is the text is going to be inside button number 3? Yes, buttons 2. You're right, guys. Because we're going to have a button 0, button 1, button 2. So the third one is going to be button 2. Great job. So after creating the actors of a node, we get to need what? The panes. And we decide to use the FlowPanes. So how do they get it to be organized, the FlowPanes? By default, horizontal left to right. But now we said that the element is going to be in a center. Okay? And we define that the horizontal gap is going to be 6. So between each bottom is going to be 6, and horizontal and in vertical is going to be 5. Okay? So here we created the buttons, but we didn't assign it to any pins, okay? We have to assign it to this pin. So we put the name of the pin, get the children, and then we add the first buttons, then the second one, then the third one, and so on. This is just created. It hasn't been assigned to anything. If we don't do this, you're not going to see anything in the screen. This is mean you get to assign it to specific pins, okay? So you get to put the buttons from 0 to 4 inside these pins. So we finish the inner part, which is the actor. Then we finish the pins. Then we have to create the third one, a scene. What is this going to get a scene? The pins is going to get the actor as an argument. Then البيجر المربع اللي طالع فوقه اللي هي السين is going to get root اللي هي الpins. After that, after creating a scene, the stage is going to get a scene. You see? So we're getting from for defining في التعريف راح نبدأ من اللي داخل إلى اللي طالع. يعني في البداية بدأنا بالactor، بعد كده البينز، بعد كده السينز، بعد كده بالستيج. تمام؟ هذا بالتعريف. كل واحد فيهم راح ياخذ الشيء اللي قبله اللي اعلى منه. يعني لما جينا عرفنا البينز، الارجيومنت اللي حقها راح تاخذ الاكترز. لما جينا عرفنا السينز، الارجيومنت اللي حقها راح تاخذ اللي اصغر منها اللي هو الروت. لما جينا عرفنا الستيج راح تاخذ اللي اصغر منها اللي هي السين. Okay? And those usually you will see them in all our examples. So let's run that one and see what we get. So you see here. So because it's going in by default, it's horizontal, right? And it's go from left to right. أساس كذا راح نشوف إن bottom 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. What if we don't say it's an elegant, it's in a center? You see here? This is the original example. Now I just remove the center to show you what is going to do. So let's now run it out. Trace species quite. See, it didn't start from center. Usually it's starting, it's by default starting from horizontal, from left to right, right. But here is starting from top left, okay? From top left, by default from top left. But the element is going to make you starting from where? But the order, أو اللي هي location. But the order is going to be following a default since we didn't change it. So it's going to be from left to right. Okay? Let's see, for example, if I change the horizontal space from 6 to 60, what I'm going to get. You see, I just increase the space between النود الأول والنود الثاني, which are bottoms in our case. So the hGap between them is just increased. So it is coming here until the end and then go down. Okay. And why is this? Why it didn't complete it and let's count 60 pixel after the bottom one and complete it in this way. Why it didn't doing this at the beginning in this size? Why did it that originally we having bottom 1, bottom 2, and then bottom 2, bottom 0, 1, sorry, and then 2 is going to the second row. Why did it do it in this way, like what I increasing it now? Exactly, Ahmed. Because we initialized الطول والعرض اللي حق السين في البداية حنا already عملناها حنا في البداية already حددناها إن هي راح تكون 300 250. Okay, so that's why it's going to follow it. I doing it like this manually. This is not the right way, but it is going to follow an order depending on the size we defined it at the beginning. Okay, so let's back to our presentation here. So this is the example. We already did it, and this is the answer. Now we're having example 2 again. So, and it's going to be with the same class, اللي هي the FlowPane, okay? So the stages, as I told you, always remember, extend, number 1, 2. There's going to be override and the number 8 is going to be similar, always. Okay, what's important for us, we will do it from here. It has a 3 main steps. First, define the actor. In this case, we have in bottoms. Second, we define the pins. Third, we define what's after pins. We're having the scene, and then fourth, the stage. Okay, node, pins, scenes, and then stage. So let's see it with NetBeans. Example 2. So we're having example 2 here. Oh, I just run it without showing you the code. Let's close this. Okay, so this is example 2. What we're going to create? We're going to create 2 params. The first one, we call an constructor, without assigning anything. So this is one of the options. Either when you're creating the buttons, which is a node, you assign the text right away. So this is one argument constructor. So you assign the text right away. The other option, you construct the buttons using the 0 argument. After that, you invoke the setText method to set a text. Okay, so at the end you will get the same result, but depending, let's say if you get an example, they said creating the buttons with the 0 constructors, then set the text, so you need to follow this part. If you said just created with that text, it's up to you if you would like to use it in this way or that way. After creating the buttons, which is a node, we'll go to the second step, which is creating pin. And in this time, we're using the FlowPanes. We call it root. We're using 0 argument constructors. And first, we get to assign. Now we assign the first buttons into these pins. We set the horizontal gap to 5, and then we assign the second buttons. The order doesn't really matter here, so you can doing a get child, both of them next to each other, and then set a horizontal gap value. After finishing the pins, we get to do scene, and a size here is 700 and 250. And finally, we give it a title first, GUI, and we invoked and we send it as scenes. It's a good question, Jane. الجيت children مثل ما شرحتها بواحدة من السلايدات كانت موجودة. الجيت children يعني أنت تقولي له رجع لي النودز اللي موجودة داخل هذه البين. Okay, اللي هي as an example مثل الليست. وهو تقولي داخل هذه الليست الجيت children معناها كأنك ترجع الليست اللي موجودة داخل هذه البينز وتوضعي داخلها هذه النود اللي هي البوتنز in this case. Okay, so الجيت children is going to return a list inside the beans. A list of what? List of nodes. So now we return it. You would like to add one into it. Okay. No. الchildren اللي موجودة داخل البين. It's not the children. Yes, actually, Abdul Al-Manam. You can imagine them as a node. Yes, children, you can imagine them as النود اللي راح تكون موجودة داخل البين. That's right. Okay. so let's run that one. We already did. So this is the output. You see here 700 because أخذنا العرض أكثر, but it's going to be 700 into 150. We just have 5 pixels between say hello world bottoms. So this is the first bottoms here, and then the second bottoms is okay. Okay. Let's assume we're creating bottom 2, but we didn't assign it. We didn't add it into all pins. What are we going to get? So this is example 2, what we are working on. So in this case, even if you create it, it's not going to show. It is not going to show here. Okay? تفضل يا أحمد. Okay? It's clear? This is another story, Ahmed. We're not going to cover it during our lecture. It's something it's not covered during our meeting, okay? Okay, so this is about example 2 here. This is the question you just asked, guys, and I explain it. When we said a root that gets children, that's add. The get children method return an instance of the JavaFX list. Okay, so it's going to return the JavaFX list. Behave similar to an array list of storing a collection of elements. So the elements مثل ما تفضلتوا, it's going to be a node, nodes in this example. So we're putting the buttons, you may be later having labels or whatever. So it is going to have a list of elements. So get child is going to return list inside the root اللي هي البينز in our example. لجين ايش ما فهمتي بالنسبة للبينز؟ ايش هي البين ولا الجيت children كيف نستخدمها؟ What's exactly you don't understand? Okay, ايش وظيفة البينز؟ خليني اراويكم هي. Okay, distract. Word. It is so slow, sorry. Okay, Word. If you remember at the beginning, I told you to understand the structure of the JavaFX. Either you think about it as stage and acting and so on, or you can think about it in a context of a Word document. It's not exactly, but it has some components look like this, okay? So, or we can also use it as, you can imagine it as a PowerPoint, okay? PowerPoint or Word or whatever, okay? So let's imagine you having this PowerPoint here. Imagine a PowerPoint, the whole PowerPoint as the stage. Are you with me, Lujan? So the whole PowerPoint is the stage. This is the bigger picture. What's after the stage? إيش يجي بعد the stage? So the bigger picture PowerPoint is the stage. What's after the stage? A scene. Okay. So a scene, you can imagine it such as the slide. So each slide is one scene. So far, so good? So عندنا each slide is a scene. So what's after a scene inside the slide? Inside the slide, what's after a scene? What do we have? So the stage, the PowerPoint document. A scene is the slides. What's after a scene? What's come after scene? Stage, scene, then what? No, it's not the content, it's not a node. Pin. Thank you. So the pins ممكن تتخيلوها as, let's say, text box. You defining the location and a size. Inside this, the pins, inside it you can put insert, for example, shapes. So this is a node. Or you can imagine it. So you don't see it. It doesn't show up. In this case, you see here, it's just like a highlight. So الباوربوينت الدوكيمنت كله ممكن تتخيلها as a stage, then the slide as a scene, then البينز here as a text box that is going to define the location and a size. So if I say it's on the top, it's going to be in this location and with that size. Sometimes I said no, it is going to be on the center and with a bigger size. So this is the pins. Then inside it, inside the pins, you will have a node. Exactly, exactly لوجين. هو اللي راح يحدد فين مكان النود بشكل عام بالبداية. بعد كذا كيف توزيع النود؟ So فين مكان النود inside the scene? It's in the center, it's on the top. It's a location and a size of الاريا اللي راح ياخذها. After that, inside it, how it's going to be organized depending on the bean type. And this is what we are discussing. So it's a FlowPanes is going to put first, then second, in horizontal, vertical, and so on. Okay? So this is about your example, Jane. Good, you understand it. Any other question? So where we were. You're welcome. Okay, so this is about the pins or roots that will get to children. The second type, we already talked now about the flow pins, which is having it in horizontal or vertical. Now, if you would like to organize a node based on a grid as a matrices format. So you said in a specific column and in a specific row, put or show this node. So ايش هي elements or attributes for grade panes? So if you would like to use the grade panes, you have to import this line. What is the attribute, the element, and then if it's visible or not, hGap will be gap similar to the FlowPanes. What's different here? You see different methods, such as an add a column, add a row. I know their name is a little bit confusing. So if we hear add a column, we will think we're going to add a column. But this doesn't mean adding a column. It's mean add. So first, the first one here, add, is going to add a node on a specific column, only one node. An added column, it's mean add multiple nodes into specific column. Here you defined a column or row. It's just a specific add. You will set it's get an argument اللي حقها is going to get a node, and you need to define the column index and the row index. And add a column, you're going to define the column index and the list of children, because it's going to add a multiple nodes. Similar than with adding in a specific row, it's going to add a row. Yes, you can imagine it as an Excel, but it's not really, because usually by default it's invisible. So this is something we didn't mention here. Thank you. So الجرايد اللي هي الخطوط الطولية والعرضية, it's going to be invisible by default. So even if we run an example soon, you won't see the horizontal and vertical lines, because by default it's invisible unless you assign the true to grid visible. Okay. So let's see the example. Again, back to this. Click right. Sorry, it's very slow. Okay, looks like it will take forever. Meanwhile, let's explain it here and we'll see it there. So first we extend the application, we override the start, then we creating an list with the type of bottoms, having 5, we creating those bottoms as exactly similar to the previous example. What's different now is the type of the panes is going to be grade. So we call a constructor of the new grade. We set an element into the center, and we set an hGap or vGap. So this is what's different, or what's new for us here. Let's see if it's worked. Still. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So let's back here. So what's new for us is here. Previously, with the FlowPanes, you didn't need to decide the column and row indices. We just said add, but we didn't use the add by itself. Remember, we said roots dot what to add in FlowPanes, the one that you asked about it, guys. So we said root dot what with the FlowPanes. Get the children. So I am asking you now to connect اساس انكم ما تنسوا تذكروا what's the difference. في الفلو بينز على اساس ان احنا نضيف node, we said the root or whatever the name اللي حق الفاريبل لنا dot get children dot add. Here we use the add right away. This is the first difference. The second difference is we need two more arguments to decide الX and الY اللي هي horizontal and verticals indices. Okay, so we defined here. So this is going to be in a 0, 0 position. Then this is going to be in 1, 0, and so on. So let's see the results. So first, you see, because we define it as an element as it's a center, so all the bottoms is going to go in the center. Okay. In the center, the first thing is going to be in a column 0 and in a row 0. The second one, here one, it is going to be in a column 1 and in a row 0. So this is, you can imagine, so this is the row 0. This is the column column 0, and this is the column 1. Then 2, it is going to be in the column 0, اللي هي هذه, this is a column 0, and then in a row 1. Okay? Bottom 3, it is going to be in the column 1 and the row 1. And then bottom 4, it is going to be in a column 0 in this way, and then in a row 2. Okay? So let's back to our presentation. So this is the output, and then we will go into the third type, which is the border pane. The border pane focused on region. هل هي راح تكون it is going to be on top, bottoms, left, right, or center? How to define those? We having an attribute for those, which is the top, right, bottom, left. If you define it at the beginning, it is going to follow what you define. So let's see the example اللي حقها. So as usual, extend the application, override. عرفنا, we define and create 5 bottoms. This is what's important for us, which is different. So we're creating a variable with a border pane. Okay, we set the elements to be the bottoms 0. It is going to be in top center. The bottom 4, is going to be in a bottom center. So here you can say it's in top, bottoms, left, right, center, or top center, bottom center, and so on. Here, how we can define the location, you see set top. We use the setter and the getter, top, left, right, center, buttons. We store on the class as a variables. In this case, we changing the variables. احنا جالسين نغير قيمة الفاريبل اللي حق التوب. So احنا نقول التوب it is going to be the bottom 0, and then the left is going to be 1, the right is going to be 2, third bottoms, and so on. خلينا نشوف الرن and we complete the explanation on it. Okay, so first we are talking about the bottom 0. It is going to be on top, but let's make it here in center, because we're using an element as a top center. Similar with the bottom 4. The bottom 4, we said it's bottom, at the bottom, but let's make it a center. We can, if you would like to decide 2 things, like bottom and center, using an element. Okay, so an element, it is going to be used if you specified exactly direction. So let's assume we didn't define those. How the result will look like. So remember this one? Okay, you remember where is the bottom 0 and the bottom 4. So let's run it now and see what we get. You see? The default of it is left. Since we already put it as a command, which is mean we didn't define an element اللي حق B0 اللي هي bottom 0 and the bottom 4, it is just going to do it in top. And the top one here means the default one. Top left. The default for it is top left. The bottom for is going to be bottom left. So this is the default. If you would like to put it on the center, you have to say it's on the center. Bottom 0, it's now on the top, right? Why it's on the left? Because the default is left. It's on the top. But where on the top? Left, right, or center on the top? If we don't decide, like in the example before, we decide it's going to be on the center. Yes, because we set it on the top. You're right. Okay? So that's why it's on the top. But where on the top? There's 3 other locations. So okay, احنا قلنا ان هي راح تكون on the top. بس راح يكون فيها 3 other locations. هل هي on the top left, center, or right? If we don't define an element, it is going to stay on the left. الديفولت حقهم كلها ان هي تكون on the left. بالنسبة إلى التوب والبوتومز. Okay. بالنسبة إلى اللي بالنسبة إلى الأعلى والأسفل اللي هي التوب والبوتومز، إيش هي الديفولت؟ هل هي الليفت ولا السنتر ولا الرايت؟ It's going to be left. طيب بالنسبة إلى الليفت، الآن هنا نشوفها هي left. It's going to be left, but it can be left on the top, and it could be left on the bottoms, and it could be left on the center. صح؟ يعني البوتوم وين الآن؟ If you take a look to it, it's on the left. But on the left it can be on top, bottom, or center. إيش اللي موجودة الآن؟ هي إيش الديفولت حقها؟ If it's on the left، إيش هي يعني الآن إحنا عندنا two direction اللي هي left ولا right ولا center. It's on the left. إيش هي الديفولت؟ top. Thank you بشرى. So the default on top. If I would like to change it, I can say element اللي حق bottom ones, then position dot left center, for example, or left bottoms. Okay. Yes, exactly, Abdulmanan. Okay. So let's back to our presentation. So this is the last example we have. The rest of our meeting doesn't have example. So we're having 2 more types of beans, but doesn't have example. So the other layout اللي راح نتعرف عليها اللي هي ال H box وال V box. Sorry. What's special about the H box is layout is children in a single horizontal row. So all children's is going to be a single horizontal. And since it's horizontal, usually having a hGap with vGap. But since all of them is going to be horizontal, we don't need a vGap. So we call it spacing. The spacing معناها هنا هي الhorizontal gap. في اللي بعدها الspacing اللي هي ال V box عندها spacing. It has a spacing. But here the spacing is a vertical gap. Okay. The other attributes inside the H box وال V box هي element نفس اللي شرحناها قبل شوية inside the other type of beans. وال full height. If it's going to return true if it's full height of the box. Okay. Similar with the V box, it has the same variables and it has a similar constructor. So it has 0 argument constructors. If we don't decide anything, it's going to get a default. اللي حق الجاب اللي هي 0. الديفولت اللي حق element اللي هي top left هي هذا الديفولت حقها. والdefault if it's full width it's going to be true. Otherwise you can use one argument only 2 لجين 1 2. We just have 2 constructor here. The second constructor إنه we can use or we can define اللي هي the spacing which is made the horizontal gap. Okay. Now we will move to the last part of our today meeting اللي هي ال UI controller اللي تكلمنا عنها في البداية بشكل سريع. راح نتكلم ايش هي معانيها in more details now, okay? So we'll talk about in more details about UI controllers. ايش هي UI controllers that we're going to cover? buttons, checklist, label, the text area. Okay, so let's take a look to those. The frequently used UI controller, you can imagine it as here. This is like a simple example of an application. It's okay, Abdussalam. So this is a title, a label. This is a label here. A text field. So this is a text field. You put things inside it, and then we having radio buttons. Then you can use one or more. The checkbox, ready you check one only. In checkbox you can choose one more than this. And then in buttons you can have one or more. So خلينا نبدأ. We'll start with the one that's the most used one, اللي هي label. I believe all of you know what it is. اللي هي التكست اللي راح تكون قبل التكست فيلد أو قبل البوتومز or any checkbox, whatever, to give you an explanation. What is this? Okay. So a label is display area of short text node on both. It's often used to label other contents. So عندنا contents ثانية as a text, buttons, whatever, and you put comment to show what it is or what's the properties. Okay. How we can define it? We define a variable. مثلا عندنا هنا LP with a type label, and we call constructor a new label, and we put a text inside it. So this is first. If you just would like to create it, if you choose to define the label at the beginning without setting label, you can later use a setText method to add a text into that label. If you would like to get a text that's stored in this label, we use a getText method. The buttons based with buttons similar to label في الاستخدام. بس هنا الbuttons ميزتها عن label, what is make it different is usually a targeted an action event. هذه راح نتكلم عنها in more detail إن شاء الله next week. Okay. So when you click that buttons, something is going to happen, an action is going to happen, which is not usually valid بالنسبة لللabel. So how we can create it with a type button class type. هنا مثلا راح نعرف نتغير variable called or object called of buttons, and then we call a constructor, and in this case we invoked zero argument constructor, so we don't set any label. The other way to do it is using one argument constructor, which is including a label in the same time. So let's assume in the first line you didn't set a label. You can set a label later. How you can do this? Using setText method. So an object name, which is an of button dot set text, and it's going to set a text. If you would like to get a text inside the buttons, you use a getText method. A text field, اللي هي الآن what's the difference between a label? It is not a place usually to get an input from a user. Usually to tell the user something. لكن التكست box is a text field. It's the place to enter or display a string. So it's not always getting something from a user. You would like to display something sometimes. So you can use a text field as well. How we can define it? We need to define an object instance, in this example called TXFA, with a type text field. In this time, we're calling a 0 argument, so it doesn't have a text. Or you can assign a text in the same times. So that means this text, it's not empty at the beginning. If we don't assign any text, we can use a set text, similar to buttons, exactly the same method, set text. And we can get a text using a get text. إيش هو الجديد هنا? What is different than the previous اللي هي buttons والlabel? There is something to get the width of a text field. How we can do this? There is a method called set brief column count. So this is going to set the width of a text field. If you would like to set it in a specific size. Okay. A text area. إيش الديفرنس? What's the difference between a text area and a text field? What's the main difference? How text area different than a text field? The main difference. Both of them راح يكون داخلها text, right? Both of them, you can put something inside it or display something out with it. So what's the main difference? Anyone know? You can see it in the slide. Both of them, the user can enter something into it. A text field or a text area. Anyone else? Default إيش عبد المنعم؟ Who knows? No. Okay. What do you mean بشرى using verb? هي مش this is not the main difference. It's a difference, but this is not the main one. Okay, I'll tell you guys. Exactly, a number of lines. Thank you, Isam. بالمثال هنا a text field you see here set column number. إيش معناها? We are not talking about how many lines. You always having one line. You defined how many columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So you set a number of columns because always you're having only one row. It's like this. So this is a text field. However, a text area, you need to define a number of rows. الطول اللي حق المقاس اللي حق الطول واللي حق العرض again. الrow والcolumns. So it can get more than one line. So this is a text area, and this is a text field. Okay. So this is the main difference. It can enter multi-line of text. So text areas can enter multiple lines of text, while in text field it can enter only one line. تمام؟ Okay. خلينا نشوف الآن how we can define and use the text area. It is really similar to what we had before. We defined the object instance with a type text area. Either is going to be empty and then we set it later, similar to what we get before, and then we can get it similarly. Or we can set it from the beginning. إيش المختلف? What is different? Here. You remember في text field, we just have set column count. Here you have a set column and you have set row. So this is a difference. Then later, since you're having multi-rows, there's something called the warping. إيش هو الwarping? الwarping إن هي is going to go to new line. Let's assume you start writing using, okay. So you start writing here, and then you reach the end. Are you supposed to start a new line or not? By default, it's off. So if you would like to go into next line, when it's reached the end, you need to set a warp text into true. Okay? So by default is off. If you would like to do warping, you need to turn it on manually. The other UI controllers we get to see today, it's a checkbox. What's a checkbox? It has used the input for Boolean value. So it's either being on or off. So for each value, it can be on or off. So for example here, with a type checkbox, we define two object instances اللي هي الnoive user types والexpo user type. And we assigned a label in the same time we calling the constructors. طيب, now what's important for us, على أساس إن هي تكون actions, it's important to know if it's checked or selected or not. There is a method called isSelected. So here you just defined it. If the user selects this option, isSelect is going to return true. If it's not selected, it's going to return false. The other type, which is similar to check, but here it's a radio buttons because you're going to have a multi options. It has an option buttons to click. So after you finish it, you click that option buttons. If it's a beta radio buttons, resemble checkbox, but the checkbox displays sequence that's either checked or blank. So it's not only one. It can be one or it can be more. Okay. So there's a circle. It's either filled, so it's selected if it's filled, or it's a blank if it's not selected. تمام. الآن exactly. It's like a quiz. It's like a multiple choice quiz. The radio buttons are different than the previous اللي أخذناهم الbuttons والlabels because you have to create two steps. You have to do it in a two steps. The first step هي the creation. You're going to create it. Then you're going to group it. So for example, if you're creating an object instance called FR اللي هي French, and the other one is English. It is going to defined like this is the circle. We having I'm just going to write FR, and then you can imagine another one which is an English, but they are not connected to each other. Each and it's just created. There is no connection between them. So the first step is creating. Okay. But you need to group them. But before going to that, there is one more sentence we didn't explain here. So at the beginning, usually if you're having a form or like let's say, like example in a form. If you're filling a form and that form is created for Saudi Arabia, you think most of the participants is going to choose Arabic. So by default, you put Arabic as filled. If you're doing it somewhere else and you said, let's say in the US, you said most of the people most likely will be speaking English. So by default, you will fill this out. So this is mean CN اللي هي هذه second object instance set is selected okay set is selected اللي هي راح تكون English. Now each of those is separate, right? We need to put them as a group. So you can doing some action based on the results at the end. So we call a class called toggle group. We create a new object instance with the 0 constructor arguments here. And then we set the friends and we set the English into that variable. Okay? Later, when the user select any of those, you can make some action based on okay, it's not supposed to be sin, it's EN. Good notice, Bushra. It is supposed to be EN. It's not sin. Okay, so that's why we're doing a group, so we can make an action later based on the selections. Okay, so this is the end of today. We will do an even and the rest of the meeting next week, inshallah. Any question? No, it's not tomorrow, next week. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will do a recursion activity. لأن الأسبوع اللي طاف ما أخذنا recursions. So next week, so tomorrow we'll do recursions activity during the lab. And next week we will complete our today presentation. It's up to you if you would like to put it or not. I'll tell you something about المشكلة بالنسبة للhomework. I cannot answer anything except the general questions. Okay. So يعني إذا كان سؤال عام جدا ممكن أجاوبه. في بعض الأسئلة I cannot tell you like do this or don't do this. لأن if you don't hit the mark that you are looking for, you said because you said that, right? يعني أنت لو قلت لي أنا أعمل كذا ولا أعمل كذا, I cannot say do this or do that. I haven't hit oh, sorry. Yes, now it's much better. I cannot answer this question, or مش لأن I would not like to. أنا ما أقدر أتحمل مسؤولية شيء أنتم المفروض أنكم تقرروه. It's depending on the question. إيش الquestion قال لكم أنتم تعملوه. I cannot tell you أنكم تعملوا فيها إيش. It's up to you البندري. If you would like to put it or not. الانسر كي No one has it yet. So أنا لو قلت لكم do this or do that وبعد كذا الانسر keys coming different تقولوا you said that right؟ أنتوا تتحملوا your choice at the end. I have no idea and I know if I know I will tell you but I don't know. Clear? So do whatever you think it's better. Yes, Yazid, I'm the one who's get to correct, but there is راح يكون فيه guide I have to follow it, and I don't know إذا كان هذا الجايد it's going to be line up مع إيش I'm going to tell you. يعني if I tell you do this وبعد كذا جاني الجايد على أساس التصحيح إنه لا هذه الطريقة راح تكون غلط أنا راح أتحمل المسؤولية right? So you need to take care of it's your responsibility to decide. الايميل اللي جاني الايميلات اللي جات لكم خصوصا الايميلات هذه الان الجامعه مغيره الشركه المتعاقده معاها بالنسبه الى البلوريزمز ف this one هي الطبيعي it's normal ان هي send email to students اذا ارسلوا مرتين. Don't do anything to my email that is coming back to you. Okay? I have 100 people. Okay, which I told you already. بالنسبة إلى الإيميلات هذه تجي نفس الأبلكيشن اللي بتتعامل مع جامعة أساس بالنسبة إلى الصورة هل تقدروا ترسموها بالوورد؟ ترسموها بأي مكان I cannot tell. It's up to you. It's your call. Okay. again الأغلبية يسأل عن الإيميلات كلها هذه الإيميلات جاية من الأبلكيشنز. بعد ما نزلت البرنامج يضغط الملفات ضغط البروجكت. If you're doing it right, it will turn on. You need to make sure when ETH just attended. I have no idea is it anything أصلاً. final راح يكون في أكواد بس إيش طولها I don't know بس أكيد إن هي راح يكون فيها أكواد. I believe so. These are fine. أسئلة مكررة في بعضهم أسئلة مكررة بالنسبة إلى اللي عملوا الزب فايل وما اشتغل معاهم يحتاجوا يبحثوا بالإنترنت ويشوفوا إيش هي المشكلة لأن الطريقة اللي عملتها اللي هي الإكسبورت هذه الطريقة يعني معتمدة يعني أني فايل مثلا المفروض تعمل له إكسبورت ترسل لي أنا أعمل له إمبورت يشتغل معي دايركت فاللي طلع عنده مشكلة يحتاج يرجع يشوف الإعدادات الطريقة اللي هو استخدمها. طيب طريقة حفظ الملف ولا يهمك الآن أشرح لكم خليني بس نعطيكم مثال ثاني. طيب اللي حاب يطلع يقدر يطلع فقط راح أشرح طريقة الصورة واضحة معكم؟ راح أشرح طريقة طيب تمام طريقة حفظ الملف. الآن نفترض هذا الملف أنا اللي حابة أحفظه راح أروح إلى الفايل لازم يكون معمول له هايلايت حلو؟ راح أروح إلى الفايل هذا كيف بعد ما اروح الى الفايل راح اعمل export الى البروجكت to the